"We appreciate your years of service, but your position has been eliminated." He said it like he was reading a script. Calm, cold eyes, a smile that never reached them. My stomach tightened when I saw the paperwork ready before I even walked in. He didn't want a conversation just to close a file. "My name is Brian Ridley. I'm 50 years old. For 2 decades, I was the automation manager at Grainworks Foods, a frozen foods and grain processing plant in rural Indiana. I joined back when they still printed reports on dot matrix paper. I was the one who turned that factory into a living, breathing organism of sensors, algorithms, and seamless systems. You wouldn't find my name in the reports, but nothing worked without me. The first time I saw Trevor Lane, I knew he didn't belong on a factory floor. Slim-fit suit, MBA from Stanford, hair perfectly styled with some overpriced European gel, buzzwords lifted straight from a podcast. He came in talking about outsourcing intelligence and exponential gains and cluster efficiency. He never looked the techs in the eye, just the profit charts. 2 weeks later, my badge stopped working. But there was one thing nobody realized. The sensors on the production line only worked because of firmware I wrote myself. Every delay, every safety redundancy, every fault tolerance tweak had my invisible signature. What he didn't know was that every single sensor in that plant still answered to my code. The conference room smelled like burnt coffee and corporate tension. When I walked in, Karen from HR was already seated, a folder resting on her lap. No introductions. No, "How are you doing?" Just the one sentence I've replayed in my head ever since. "Your position has been eliminated. We thank you for your years of service." The word eliminated echoed like a system error. I stood there for a couple of seconds. Then I simply nodded. No questions. No outburst. Just silence. I went to my locker, grabbed an empty box, and started packing 20 years of my life quietly. A photo of my wife from my first day on the job, a Grainworks mug that never held a decent cup of coffee, and a black flash drive containing my custom firmware, the one that kept the sensors calibrated and the quality control systems from freezing up. 2 weeks earlier, they'd already started phasing me out. They changed the remote access system and never sent me the new credentials. 2 consecutive maintenance meetings got canceled without explanation. When I asked Trevor about it, he just said, "We're rethinking the workflow. You'll have time to relax." It felt like a warning, soft and smug, but I didn't expect the cut to be that blunt. The worst part wasn't getting let go. It was how they did it. Cold, clinical. No one even asked where the physical backups were. No mention of the custom firmware I'd written years ago, tuned piece by piece to those aging machines a contractor would never understand. They thought they could replace it all with modern solutions. They wanted the speed of rising charts, without understanding what made those charts rise in the first place. Trevor handed me a sheet outlining the so-called smooth transition. He'd signed a deal with MachTech Solutions, a company that, in his words, would handle everything with AI and cloud-based analytics. I knew MachTech. They made great PowerPoint slides, but they couldn't tell the difference between a noisy sensor and a feedback loop failure. On my way out, I crossed paths with Eli, one of the techs I'd trained from scratch. He started there at 19. Now he had 2 kids. He opened his mouth to say something, but just shook his head. I gave him a light pat on the shoulder, no words needed. We both knew what was coming. Out in the parking lot, as I placed the box on the passenger seat, my phone buzzed. An automatic notification. One of the thermal sensors on line B had lost sync. The system was still trying to alert me. They didn't even know how to shut that off. I sat in the car, took a deep breath. For the first time in months, I had no reason to rush home. And strangely, that brought a sense of peace. But deep down, I knew. What Trevor called a smooth transition was about to become a controlled collapse. The system was still talking to me. They'd only realized that when it was far too late. The house was quiet when I got home. Too quiet. I pushed the door open with my shoulder, balancing the box against my chest. The floorboards creaked beneath me, like even the house was surprised I was home this early. I set everything down on the kitchen table, didn't take off my coat, just stood there staring at the wall like I was waiting for some kind of explanation. But silence was the only answer. Beth appeared in the hallway doorway, still holding a cup of tea. When she saw me, she didn't ask anything. She just placed the cup next to me, quietly. Then after a few seconds, her voice barely above a whisper, she said, "They did what I was afraid they would, didn't they?" I nodded. That was all. She knew how much of myself I'd poured into that factory. It wasn't just a job. It was something I'd built. A thin, invisible line between what I understood and what no one else ever could. After lunch, I went out to the garage, opened the tool cabinet, and pulled out the drawer where I kept my old projects. Hand-drawn schematics, disassembled sensors, code scribbled on yellowing sheets of paper, years of logic made real. In the bottom corner, a small black case, my personal backup, updated every week, not out of mistrust, but because after years of asking, the company never approved a proper documentation team. We'll deal with that later, they always said. Later never came. 3 days went by. No calls, no emails, nothing but silence from Grainworks. Part of me started to wonder maybe they'd pulled it off. Maybe the consultants managed to get things running. Then, on the 4th day, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Eli. Full crash on line B. Sensors are freezing. Temperatures out of control. We're flying blind. I knew this would happen. I knew. But seeing it in writing from someone still in there, it cut deep. Like watching a building you poured your life into start to shake in the wind. They were trying to fly a plane using the wrong manual and still convinced the problem was just turbulence. That night, Beth found me sitting in the garage, facing an old conveyor part I'd kept as a memento. She rested her hand gently on my shoulder, saying nothing. And I didn't speak either. I just sat there. Could the factory move on without me? The production line was trying to run without me. But what it was really saying was that it couldn't. On the morning of the 5th day, I didn't check my email. Didn't look at any diagrams. I just sat on the porch with a mug of coffee and stared out at the field behind the house. The wooden fence I built 15 years ago was still standing steady, even after all the storms and seasons. I thought about how some structures hold up through anything. Others collapse at the first crack. The factory was one of those. Beth sat beside me. Didn't say a word at first, just placed her hand gently over mine. After a few quiet minutes, she spoke. Her voice calm in the way only someone who's seen every one of your sleepless nights can be. Maybe it's time you build something of your own. It didn't sound like advice. It sounded like permission. That afternoon, I revisited an old name in my contact list, Ed Morales. We'd met years ago, back when he was still a maintenance tech at a small regional competitor, Pure Mills Foods. Now, he was their lead technical supervisor. I called him without really knowing what to say. But he picked up with a tone like he already knew what I needed. Brian? Man, it's good to hear your voice. I heard about what happened. That was a huge mistake on their part. You want to talk? 2 hours later, we were sitting across from each other at a roadside cafe. Ed didn't waste time. I've got 2 guys on my team, smart but still green. They need someone who can teach them more than just buttons. They need to understand the soul of the machine. And that's something only you know how to pass on. I sat in silence for a moment. Part of me was still tethered to that Grainworks line. I could still smell the oil on the floor, hear the belts moving in perfect sync. But another part wanted to build something new. I don't want to go back to the way things were, Ed. I want to do it my way. Slower. Solid foundation, I said. He smiled. That's exactly what we need. I drove home with an informal consulting offer in hand and an idea in my head. Maybe the factory I needed to build now didn't have walls. Maybe it had people. By the end of the day, Eli sent another message. Plant was down for 7 hours today. CEO's freaking out. Outsourcing team can't figure out the sensor network protocols. They mentioned your name. I replied with just one line. Look out for your crew. It'll get worse before it gets better. I had already chosen a different path. They lost a name on a badge. But what they really lost, they were about to find out. That night I sat in the office beside the garage. The desk lamp cast long shadows over old papers, like even the room remembered all those years I spent anticipating failures before they ever happened. I plugged my old external hard drive into the laptop. It held more than firmware, it held traces of my routine. Sensor logic, maintenance scripts, quiet tweaks I made over the years. Not for control, for safety. The official documentation never came. I asked for it for years. All I got were empty promises after every meeting. We'll take care of that in the next phase. The next phase never came. Now, with everything I'd built intact on that drive, I began organizing the files again. But this time, not to preserve, to pass it on. The next morning, Ed introduced me to the team. Jeremiah, 26, curious, Fast. A little too eager for someone who hasn't yet hit a major failure. Deshaun, 30. Quiet. Focused. The kind of guy who listens more than he talks. And when he does speak, it's only what matters. We sat around the lab table. No formal introductions. Just a blank sheet of paper and a simple sketch of a pressure sensor. This, I began, isn't just a part. It's the first line of defense between a stable system and a shutdown line. When it fails, the factory doesn't scream. It goes silent. And silence, gentlemen, is where the losses hide. They both stayed quiet. So I went on. No system survives ignorance. You're going to learn to listen before you touch a single button. That afternoon, we built the framework for Pure Mill's pilot line. Every connection mattered. We used sensors I knew like the back of my hand. The difference now? Every step was recorded. Manuals, code, training. We weren't just building a new system. We were building a new logic in the machines and in the people. Meanwhile, Eli kept sending updates. Temperature sensors freezing mid-cook cycle. Conveyor belts misaligned, load readings out of range. CEO wants to know who wrote the control protocol. People are saying your name in the halls. They were starting to realize what they had done. Or rather, what they had erased. Grainworks' systems were built to work, but the only person who ever knew why was me. And now, here I was, teaching two young guys how to build something better. With foundation, with logic, with dignity. Trevor, on the other hand, still thought it was just a technical issue, thought he could hire a new brain. But what he never understood was this: the one who builds the maze always knows the way back. It was a clear Tuesday morning when my phone rang. Area code from Grainworks. I ignored it. Seconds later, another call, and another. I decided I'd check the voicemails at the end of the day. I already knew what they'd say. That morning, Jeremiah and Deshaun were running final tests on the new pilot line at Pure Mills. The line was producing grain packs continuously, no hiccups. The system now rewritten by the three of us didn't rely on closed code anymore. I made it a point to walk them through every line of logic, every predicted fault, every mapped exception. That afternoon, we sat down to review performance. 99. 1% stability. A record. Ed walked in with a quiet smile and said, "If this line holds up under tomorrow's volume, we're scaling it to the main line." That's when I saw the notification on my phone. Voicemail from Eli. "Brian, they're falling apart." Mach Tech walked out, said they can't stabilize the sensors without rewriting the entire logic network. Production stopped last night. The CEO lost it. People are saying you sabotaged the system. But everyone here knows that's not true. This factory was never meant to run without you. I paused, looked out the window of the tech lab. The two young guys were still working the cables, laughing at some inside joke. They had no idea, but in that moment, the switch flipped. A little later, another voicemail came in, this time from Karen in Grainworks HR. "Brian, we're facing some operational challenges. We'd like to discuss a possible short-term consulting engagement. The CEO specifically asked that we reach out to you." Consulting. After firing me with a generic "thank you," I opened my personal email. There it was, with the subject line, "Urgent, technical support requested, confidential." The message was blunt. "We're prepared to offer $400 per hour for emergency support over the next 3 days. Production is at risk, awaiting your response." I took a deep breath, picked up my phone and called Ed. "Should I decline this out loud, or would you prefer I write it up nicely in an email?" He laughed on the other end. "If you want, I'll send you a picture frame. You can hang the offer on the wall." By the end of that day, Pure Mills approved the expansion of the new line for full-scale production, and I was officially introduced as technical mentor and integration lead for the next phase of the plant. Meanwhile, Grainworks was spiraling. The finance department started calculating hourly losses. Techs began quitting. And Trevor? Trevor tried calling me 3 times that night. I never called back. Didn't have to. Because when the machine stops, the truth comes out. And what had broken down wasn't the system. It was him. Wednesday, 7:42 a.m. My phone buzzed with a new notification. Urgent meeting request. Grainworks Foods. Attached, a video conference link and a revised offer. $550 per hour. 3-day minimum, NDA included, travel covered. I didn't reply. At 10:00 a.m., another message came in from Eli. Brian, they're saying the plant won't survive another 24 hours of downtime. Trevor flew in texts from the West Coast, but nothing's working. The sensors are stuck in loop mode. They can't even understand the protocol. Are you going to help? The question echoed in my head. I looked at the whiteboard on my wall covered with the full architecture of the new Pure Mills system. Modular, redundant, open, every component documented. Every technician trained to understand why, not just how. That same morning, Ed walked into the lab holding an envelope. Formal contract offer. Want to become our technical director? I looked over the offer. Fair salary, full autonomy, no strings attached, and best of all, respect. I signed on the spot. By noon, I was having lunch with Jeremiah and Deshaun. They showed me a new piece of code they'd written on their own, an optimization for flow readings in the grain silos. You taught us this, Jeremiah said, smiling. On the way back, another call. This time, it was Trevor himself. I picked up, said nothing. He hesitated for 2 seconds, then, Brian, we need your help. Look, I know we didn't part on good terms. I know mistakes were made, but production's down. Thousands of orders are late. The board's putting on pressure. If you can come in, any rate, any condition. I stayed silent. He kept going. You can name your price. We can even talk about a permanent return. New title, full recognition, whatever you want. I took a deep breath. Trevor, I already have a new badge. And here, people ask for my input before shutting off my access. Silence on the other end. Heavy. Brian, don't do this. The company needs you. You needed me before. Now, you just need someone to clean up the mess. Is this revenge? No, it's clarity. I don't go back to places where I was treated like excess. Good luck. I hung up. At 5 p.m., Ed walked back into the room. Just got a quiet call. One of Grainworks' major clients isn't happy. They're looking for new supply options. And they were asking about our system. I smiled. Tell them we're ready. Trevor wanted to put out the fire. But the fire he started wasn't technical. It was human. And now he was surrounded by machines that don't obey people who never learned how to listen. Friday morning, I received an envelope by express delivery. The sender, Grainworks Foods. Inside, a new offer. Position, Director of Technical Operations salary, 50% above market average. Signing bonus, $30,000 special clause. Direct report to the CEO conditions. Immediate return to lead production recovery. At the bottom of the letter, a handwritten note. Brian, we know we made mistakes, but we'd like to start over. Trevor. I stared at the paper for minutes. There was something ironic about the whole thing. They were offering me exactly what I had always deserved, only now that they were on the floor. Beth saw the envelope lying open on the table. Are you going to take it? No. You sure? More sure than I've ever been. That afternoon, the phone rang again. It was Trevor. This time I answered. Brian, did you get our package? I did. So, what did you think? Well written. But it's addressed to the old Brian. The one you let go without even looking in the eye. Silence. He took a deep breath. I can't change what happened, but I can promise you things would be different. Full autonomy. Your own team. The entire plant under your command. I let out a small laugh. You still don't get it, Trevor. This was never about position. It's about respect. Do you want to see me fall apart? No, Trevor. I just don't want to be part of a system that only sees someone's worth after everything's collapsed. He kept trying for a few more minutes. Tried the emotional pitch. Tried the technical angle. Even suggested I could train the next generation from the inside. But it was too late. After I hung up, I walked over to the Pure Mills lab. Saw Jeremiah fine-tuning the sensors with Deshaun, laughing, swapping ideas. The line was stable. The data flowed clean. The system was breathing. They had questions, but they knew how to ask. And that meant everything. As I was leaving, Ed stopped me. The CEO of our biggest client wants to meet you in person. Heard you designed the new system. Said he's never seen this level of stability in the reports. I nodded in thanks. And in that moment I realized the choice had already been made. It wasn't about staying or going back. It was about never selling the one thing that only comes once. Dignity. Grainworks didn't want my knowledge. They just wanted to erase their own failure with my presence. I had turned down the offer. But one question still lingered, the hardest one of all. What do you do with everything you've been through? Now, 3 months later, I walked into the main conference room at Pure Mills, but not as a visitor. On the glass door, my name appeared on a small, understated plaque. Brian Ridley, Director of Innovation and Technical Strategy inside. The young techs who once barely knew how to align a sensor were now leading meetings, proposing upgrades and training new hires. The system we had built was now running in 3 of the company's plants with failure rates nearing 0. On one of the walls, the performance boards showed more than just numbers. They showed something deeper. Trust. Trust in those who build with purpose. Trust in the ones who stayed when everything else shook. That week, we got a visit from Harper Grains, one of the region's largest distributors and a former Grainworks partner. Their rep didn't waste time. What you have here is exactly what we've been looking for. The reports don't lie. The system stability, the response times, the data clarity, it all points to something built by someone who truly understands the factory floor. Ed shot me a quick glance. I let him speak. These days, I don't have to be the one talking. The team speaks for me. That night, back on the porch, Beth brought out 2 mugs of tea. We sat in silence like always. But this time, the silence felt different. It was full. She asked, "Do you regret not going back?" I answered while looking out at the field, where the sensors of a new life were already fully online. The best way to go back is never needing to. Later that evening, I posted a short message on LinkedIn. It's not revenge, it's rebuilding. This time with documentation, training, and respect. The next day, dozens of messages came in. Former colleagues, ex-subordinates, even a few techs still working at Grainworks. One stood out. It was from Eli. "They lost you, but I learned from you. Thanks for showing us that dignity isn't something you trade." I closed the laptop, smiled. The line I'm most proud of calibrating was my own story. Sometimes the most important machine to rebuild is yourself. And you? Have you ever been treated like you were replaceable, only to realize the one thing they couldn't replace was you?